Hello everyone, welcome back to Seams and Notches. If this is your very first time, thank you so much for joining the family, and please don't forget to subscribe, hit the notification button so you don't miss a thing. And if you are a returning subscriber, thank you once again for joining us, and please don't forget to comment down below on what next you want us to feature on this channel. Now, without any further ado, let's get started on what we have for you today. Right, these are the tools that we are going to be using today. I have got my fabric, which is a calico fabric or a muslin fabric, depending on where you are in the world. I have my pattern paper. I've got my straight ruler, and this is totally optional. You don't need to include that. I have got my measuring tape. I have got my case of sewing pins. I have got my draping tape as well. I have got my paper scissors, my fabric scissors, my tracing wheel, and I've got my pencil. I have a marker here. This is totally optional. I am just using this marker for demonstration purposes. These are all the tools that we'll be using today. For today's tutorial, I am using a UK size 10 dress form. That is a US size 6 dress form if you live in the United States. Now, just in case you don't have a dress form that has lines indicated on it, you don't have to worry. I am going to give you the measurements that you need for your positions. So for the waist, normally you would get your tape going round the natural waistline, and when it comes to the hip line, in order for you to get that on a UK size 10 or a small size, you need to measure 20 centimeters from the waistline downwards, and wherever that position stops, that is your hip line. For your dot position on this size, which is a UK size 10 or a US size 6, you will normally have approximately from the center front, you will measure 3.5 inches, or if you're using centimeters, that will be 8.5 centimeters. Again, for the dot position on this size, you will normally have approximately 3.5 inches, or if you're using centimeters, that will be 8.5 centimeters. And once you have your dot position, you're going to get your draping tape. Take that straight down to the hemline, depending on the length of your dress form. The next thing we need to do is to follow the side seam down to the hem of your dress form as well. We're going to be draping a basic skirt, so I'm going to be working on half of the dress form, so I don't need to do the full skirt because it's symmetrical. Whatever is here is going to be at the other side, so I'm just going to work with half of the dress form. Depending on the kind of style you're going for when it comes to draping your skirt, if it's a different style and you need a 360-degree measurement of your hip line, in order for you to get that, you're going to measure 20 centimeters from the waistline down to the hip line, 20 centimeters or 8 inches on one side. On the center front as well, you're going to measure 20 centimeters downwards, and you're going to mark a point there, mark a point there, mark a point there. On the other side, you're going to repeat that same measurement, and you're going to mark a point there. At the back as well, you are going to repeat that same measurement and mark a point there. So you have your 360 degree position. Just in case you are using a different size from what I have here, maybe a few sizes bigger or a few sizes smaller, what you would normally do is to follow the natural waistline and mark that in as your waistline. And when it comes to the hip line, in order for you to get that, you are going to measure from the waistline downwards to the fullest part of the hip. And once you have that, you mark that in and use your draping tape to follow that line to the back. Now, if you're using a different size, if it's smaller, you are free to use 3.5 inches for your dot position. But if you're using a size bigger or different sizes up from this size that I have here, feel free to use 4 inches for your dot position. Again, for the back, you have your center back line. You're going to use your draping tape to follow that line from the waistline, and you have your dot position, the same measurement that you use for the front, you're going to use that, and you have your side seam already mapped out with your draping tape. Now we have everything. It's time to prepare our fabric. Before you start marking your position onto your fabric, first thing you need to do, you need to make sure you have your fabric wide enough and long enough for your skirt block. Once that is done, on the selvedge, you are going to fold inwards 1 inch or 2.5 centimeters inwards, just like I have here. So this is the right side and that is the wrong side, and you will have that folded in or pressed in like what I have here. So you're going to repeat that same step for both the front and the back of your skirt block. Like we did on the dress form, we need to as well mark positions on our fabric. To prepare our fabric, what we need for the width of our fabric, we need to measure along the hip line on your dress form. So from the center front, you need to measure to the side seam. Whatever measurement you have, you are going to add ease. And the measurement for your ease is 6 centimeters or 2.65 inches if you're using inches. For the length of your fabric, you will need to measure from the waist position down to whatever length that you need for your skirt. Whatever that is, you are going to as well add 6 centimeters for ease or 2.65 inches for ease if you're using inches. In order for you to mark your hip line onto your fabric, what you need to do is to go to your dress form and measure the distance between the waistline and the hip line. Whatever measurement you have, you need to add 3 centimeters to that measurement, and that measurement is what you need to mark in your hip position onto your fabric. Once you have your hip line marked in onto your fabric, the next thing you need to do is to mark in the dot position along the hip line. And you can get that position from your dress form. Whatever measurement you have on your dress form for the dot position along the hip line, that is the same measurement that you're going to mark in onto your fabric. So I have mine here. You're going to repeat that for both the front and the back of your fabric. As mentioned earlier, we are going to be dealing with just the half side of our dress form. Now, I have my front skirt fabric here with me, already prepared. So what I need to do is to follow the hip line I have on my fabric, and I am going to trace that onto the hip line of my dress form. So I'm just going to follow that line like so, first of all. And I'm just going to use my sewing pin to pin that in place. That is to secure our fabric onto our dress form. So once you've located your hip line on your dress form, you're going to follow that hip line using your pin, your sewing pin, to secure that like so. I have mine here, so I'm just going to secure that like so. Once that is done, I'm going to go over to the side seam and pin that in place as well. You want to make sure your line is well aligned to the hip line on your dress form. So once that is secured, we are going to follow along the center front. We're just going to follow this line and pin this in place like so. So the reason why we added ease to the length of our skirt is just to give us enough room to play with around the waist area. So we want to make sure we're not cutting or draping into the waist line. And that is why we added our ease onto the length of our fabric. Again, I am going to use my sewing pin to secure this, the center front. I'm just going to use my pin to secure that in place. Now we have our front pattern piece pinned in place. We're going to work on the waist area. Next, we need to create our skirt dart. So for the skirt dart, you will naturally follow what is underneath your fabric. which is the dot position that is on the dress form, this one here. So from your fabric, you can see, for my fabric, I can see underneath the dot position on my dress form. So you're going to naturally follow that point. Once you've located that point, you're going to pin that in place like so. So what I need to do after that is pinned in place. I am going to create a dot along this line that I have on my dress form. The dot line, I'm going to create my dot here. So you want to make sure you're following that dot line. Once that is created, you're going to pin that dot position in place like so. And you're left with the remaining of your fabric. Again, just to create ease around the waist, you're going to cut through, just give it a snip. You're just going to cut through or snip through the top edge of your fabric just to create that ease. Once you're done snipping the top edge of your fabric, that allows your fabric to be more relaxed and give it a bit of ease. Once that is done, you're going to use your palm or your finger to press your fabric along the form like so. So you don't want to force anything, like I said before. Once you're happy with that position, giving it a bit of ease as well, you're just going to pin that in place like so. So you don't want to create any bumps. You want to make your fabric as smooth as possible onto the dress form. Once you're happy with that, again, you don't want it too tight, you don't want it too snug onto your dress form. Once you're happy with that, you are good to start marking in your position. So we have our skirt dot, we have our hip position marked in. Now the next thing is to mark all the position, including the waist point, the side seam, and the length of your skirt, and as well as the dots. You need to mark in the dot position onto your fabric. So before you start marking in your position onto your fabric, you need to make sure you pin away the front skirt dot like so. So I am going to take my sewing pin and gently follow that dot line and just pin that in place like so. So you want to follow that dot line and you want to make sure you pin in place. So once you're happy with that, the next thing you need to do is to get your pencil. I am using a marker just for demonstration purposes. You would normally not use a marker, you will use your pencil. Just for demonstration purposes, I am using a marker for you to see the lines clearly. So I am going to start first of all following what I have underneath my fabric. I am following the waistline like so, just little dash line strokes like that, just little dash lines. You want to make sure you follow what is underneath your fabric. That is the waistline on your dress form. You want to make sure you follow that line. You're going to repeat that same step onto the side seam as well. Then for your dot, you are going to do the same. You want to make sure you have your dot as neat as possible onto your fabric. Once that is done, you're just going to snip away the excess fabric you have. And your front skirt block is draped. Next, we're going to work on the back skirt, but before we do, we need to make sure we follow this line and fold along the side seam, removing your previous pin that you used in securing the side seam. You are going to take that out and use that again, fold in the side seam towards the front, and you're going to pin that in place like so. Again, you're going to follow along the side seam, fold that in place. So you're going to pin towards the front skirt. going to fold that like so. The reason why we had to fold that to the front, we need enough room to work on the back skirt.